And it quite seems that in Africa, I'll give you a small breather, then we'll come back. But it's very clear that in Africa, institutions are structured to accommodate maybe political rejects and retirees. Even when you talk about the positions that they've been creating, look at African infrastructure, whatever that Raila Odinga is running. What does it do? How many roads does it build? How many kilometers of road does it build in Africa? Has it championed for development? What is the oversight on all these things? What is the accountability of that office? Africa and creating offices.
Mzee Odinga, whom I respect, but whose political views I do not share, he has a role. He's played a role. History will remember him partly fondly, sometimes not so fondly, but we'll acknowledge that he came and that he served. But when you talk about infrastructure, there must be a context. When you talk about Inga Dam, for example, which they keep on talking about and holding meetings about, it must be an adopted African Union infrastructural program under the aegis of the Union. Otherwise, you can hold meetings and seminars and other things, but you will not achieve anything. Look, if infrastructure was a great thing, I would have loved to hear that office talking about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which is threatened by, is it Trump who said that Egypt may one day bomb it? I would have wanted them to talk about the Julius Nyerere hydroelectric power which is going on. I would have wanted them to talk about a railway line that takes us from Djibouti to Dakar. I would have wanted them to talk about the oil pipeline from Angola to East Africa. I would have wanted them to talk about the oil situation in the Bakassi Peninsula. I would have wanted them to talk about infrastructure in that way. The Yamoussoukro Protocol on the open skies and building of airports. But as you rightly say, we create too many officers to massage people's egos. Let me be blunt, so that you can say in your card that I'm the head of this, I'm the head of NEPAD, I'm the head of Great Lakes. But when you look at the dividends that we derive from such officers, zilch, to use the slang, zilch.
Nada.
Hakuna.
Zero. Hakuna kitu. All right, I'll give you a small break. I'll look at the comments briefly. Then we come back now through the Kenya, through the DNA, to patana shida zetu. I can say Wilson To is saying watching, Magdalene Obogi watching. Thank you so much. Elizabeth Karanja Wisdom Galo sent Wilson To says GB, you should have brought Barack Boluka too. Yeah, I think you get, people see you as a pair with Barack Boluka. All right, I'm seeing Upper John Nyakwal. When an African man leaves his homestead, he must make sure that he comes home with something by all means. By hook or crook, it's evident everywhere in Africa. Men from nearby community would organize and raid men in the next community and run away with their belongings and other sources of sources of livelihood, like livestock. Cattle rustling is such a practice. Therefore, theft and corrupt practices are deeply rooted in us. Good morning, Bitok. My greetings to Professor Plo Lumumba. Ezra Roti says using wisdom. Benedict Okino, please, Gerald, move faster to the men. All right. There, Elizabeth Karanja, politely to Museveni. You're so polite to Museveni. I'm seeing Matthias Jeboy, BBI is the climax, eagerly waiting on PLO's tech. I will get in there. Max Kimali says very educative. Elias Chepkieng, Professor PLO, I'm elated by the discourse. Thank you so much. Bernard Chiriad, BBI, I would want to listen to what he say about it. Kibor Lagat, Plo Lumumba, I'm leaving for work, but my questions are what happened between Uhuru and Raila Miguna? What is the progress of corruption fight in Kenya as compared with the international fight? Do you think if BBI passes, can Uhuru start afresh as alleged? What happened with Ruto? Corrupt cases, as they political? Because none has been prosecuted. Kibor Lagat from Eldoret. Jediso Congo says BBI is not a priority. Give us time to absorb some wisdom. Elizabeth Karanja, PLO, Encyclopedia. How much you're wondering where you get all those names that you're mentioning at the project? I think I'll need 15 years to cram 3 dams in Africa. And I say, don't comment. What an exciting show this morning with PLO. This is a great guy. Thank you so much. Yeah, all men are equal, but Kenya, we are not reasoning. Kaniariwa says these guys are working at drive. Right, David Kamal, good morning, Team Tackle. Good morning to you. Max Kimeli, even more left power. Kins Bwana PLO Lumumba, normalize your English. Tajiri Mayepelo is using knowledge and history. What a show. Asante sana. I wish I could read all the comments. The comments are really running in quick and fast. But I want us to come back home. What did you say is the state of the nation?
You know, the nation, because of COVID, is suffering. The nation is suffering. Look at our tourism sector. We have lost jobs in the millions. In the month of August this year, I'm told we received no more than 5,000 visitors. Young men and women employed in the sector are unemployed. Look at our agriculture, is suffering. Look at our manufacturing sector, it is suffering. The net effect is that in truth, all the 47 counties in Kenya are technically insolvent. Just this morning, I'm reading that the young men and women who are contracted to make the desks have not been paid. Many who are engaged by government and quasi-governmental institutions have not been paid. Our economy is not doing well. We are now going back to the IMF. When you see a country going back to the IMF, know that the economy is moving away from the high dependency unit into the ICU. And what is going to happen? We are going to have structural adjustment. We are going to be asked to devalue our currency. Imports are going to be more expensive. And of course, it is going to impact on our health sector, education sector, agriculture sector. We are not going to create jobs. We are going to have problems. And remember the infrastructure that we borrowed, for example, the SGR. A single track lane will never make profit. Never. Never has a single track diesel-driven railway line made profit anywhere in the world. And look at our Kenya Power and Lighting, a monopoly that is now running an overdraft, a monopoly. Look at our Kenya Meat Commission, tottering until it went to the military. Now it is beginning to wake up.
They have been given 563 million.
It's amazing. And we never stopped eating meat. And yet it became bankrupt. That tells you that the economy is not doing very well. We are in dire straits. And I would have loved to see our parliament convened on an emergency basis to discuss the state of the Kenyan economy. I would have loved to see that, but I have not.
The only thing we are converging around is the politics of the day.
Which is sad. Which is sad. Sad because, as the saying goes, politicians look to the next elections, not the next generation. My friend Muhisa Kitui tells me, and he said it publicly, you cannot solve political bad manners through constitutional amendments. We now believe that through amending the constitution,
now we can fix
our political bad manners. We are just ill-mannered. And we will not. And this is what brings us, if you may, to the BBI.
And a question even before you are a user of the constitution.
Yes.
You participated in the birthing of a constitution. You know the journey that we've come all along to have the constitution in 2010. We've taken over 30 years, close to 30 years.
Correct.
Do you feel we have a constitutional moment, even before we go to that? Do you feel like, are we pregnant?
No, we are manufacturing a constitutional moment. There is no constitutional moment. We are manufacturing one. When we had a constitutional moment in 1980s, after the 1980 Mlolongo election, the Moi administration recognized there was a constitutional moment. That is why he put together the Saitoti Commission. And when the Saitoti Commission had moved around the country, people told them things that they never expected. And of course, we came up with the 1992, then the politicians torpedoed it. Then in 1996, we had a constitutional moment. The politicians torpedoed it through the IPPG. Then we now had a constitutional moment. And once again, we had the CKRC, in which I served for nearly 4 years. There was a constitutional moment. The constitution had been dismembered from 1964, so dismembered that in the year 1969, the constitution had changed character and had to be reorganized and reissued anew. From 1969, we see the fundamental changes. 2A. and all those other changes, there was a constitutional moment. And that constitutional moment was once again squandered after we went to the Bomas of Kenya. We had the so-called Kilifi and Wako drafts, and we squandered the thing in 2005. And because we missed the constitutional moment, we had the post-election violence in the year 2007.
Yes.
And therefore, when Kofi Annan came and brokered the fragile peace amongst the political class, we now are working in an environment that required a matter of intervention constitutionally. That is how we ended up with the Constitution of Kenya 2010. There was no constitutional moment. You know, after the elections in 2013, which was won by President Kenyatta, and I think he won the election, despite the contestation to the country, he won the election. He even won the 2017 election. Fact. The election may have been bedeviled by certain things, but I keep on asking, those who support BBI, had NASA won the elections, would you have had a BBI? No. No. And they know it. The BBI was essentially the product of a ceasefire. A president who had won an election, remember the election was nullified. There was a repeat election which was boycotted by the opposition, who then, in a manner that I've never understood, purported to have their candidate sworn in on the basis of the results of a nullified election in which they participated. I've never understood. Is without precedent in the world. Then, President Kenyatta, having recognized that the opposition had weaponized their constituency, Kenya was receiving very bad press, and he recently himself admitted that the Kenya was on the brink. And remember, at that time, there are elements within the opposition who actually suggested, complete with a map, that Kenya should be partitioned. That is how grave and close we were to a civil war. And wisdom did prevail, both internally and externally, and there was a rapprochement. This is normally what is described as the handshake on the 9th day of March, the year 2018, involving Mzee Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, the president. After that, I think BBI was an afterthought. I may be wrong, and I will be corrected through force of reason rather than by reason of force. The BBI then came that we have signed this thing, but it's too hollow. A handshake in and of itself doesn't mean much. Let us flesh it out. Let us populate it. Let us therefore come up with a BBI, which had a 9-point agenda. Initially, to deal with electoral problems. That was the fundamental mandate of the BBI, that it appears that every time we go into an election, we don't end up well, we end up quarreling. What can we possibly do to ensure that this does not happen? And therefore, that was their mandate. The BBI committee was then put together in a mostly unprocedural way. Individuals who served there were never interviewed, like everybody else had agreed that when you want to serve in public office in Kenya, you ought to be subjected to a competitive process. They were not. They were appointed by the political players. They used public money, and they came up with an initial BBI report, which was so badly done that they had to go back.
They actually denied. They said, no, this is not our document.
Yes.
The BBI one.
Yes, the BBI one. I don't know where it was manufactured from. Then they now came up with this one. And I think as they go through the process, short-term political interest then takes center stage. So that BBI, in my view, and I want to be candid and blunt, and it doesn't mean that I'm right. It simply means that this is my opinion. I think that in the eyes of a number of politicians, the BBI is a Trojan horse. And I'll give a little history about the Trojan horse.
Please.
The Trojan horse was a horse that was created, a wooden horse, that was created by the Greeks when they invaded Troy. and they hid soldiers inside it. And Helen of Troy warned them and said, even when a Greek bears a gift, never trust him. So a Trojan horse is a wooden thing that is created to achieve a purpose other than the declared purpose. In the minds of some politicians, this is now a Trojan horse that will deliver to them the presidency, will deliver to them the prime ministership, will enable them to contest these offices. And who are these? The governors, people in opposition whose term is coming to an end. That is why you end up with a BBI report now that purports to take over the work of Parliament. It purports to take over the work of the Law Reform Commission. It purports to take over the work of the Attorney General, and prescribes things that really, in my view, don't make constitutional sense. The Constitution has yet to be fully implemented. And let me give you a few examples. They introduce Article 10A. 10A says that we will now become a good citizen of Africa and we believe in African Confederation. But that is what is said in the Treaty of the East African Community. You don't need it in our constitution.
I've also said we need to appreciate our black color.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need.
We had a problem with
we must be the only constitution in the world which will have such a provision. The 18A says we must respect our parents. The Bible says so. The Quran says so. The Torah says so. Do you need that in a constitution? That we now must change. The people called cabinet secretaries must now be called ministers. How does that help in post-election? I mean, it is so sad. And then they say that the counties will now have 35% of the budget. Give more functions. And it could even be 80. You don't need to write that or even 100. You don't need to write that in the Constitution. Then they say that in order to have inclusivity, we must now have a prime minister, a deputy prime minister, two of them. Did we not, was Jomo Kenyatta not the prime minister of Kenya in 1963? Did we not amend the constitution in 1964 to make Jomo Kenyatta the president of Kenya? What has happened? Was Raila Amolo Odinga not the prime minister in the year 2008? Don't we remember the conflict between Raila Amolo Odinga, the prime minister, and Kalonzo Musyoka, the vice president, and the conflict in parliament which allowed Marende to deliver a decision which we described by the media as Solomonic? Wasn't there conflict? Did we not have Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta as a deputy prime minister? Did we not have Musalia Mudavadi as a deputy prime minister? Did we not change that in the Constitution of Kenya 2010? Why are we bringing it in after only 10 years? Then we are told, and I am a supporter of women's involvement because of the historical disadvantage that they have suffered over the years. I'm therefore affirmative action. I supported it at Bomas and I do. But look at their prescription. We introduced 360 seats. And if we don't get enough women, then we go to the party list, and on the basis of the votes that have been cast, we top up until we get a number that ensures that there's no gender is more than 2/3. We'll do that for 15 years. They have now introduced a term limit. Our parliament could end up being one of the largest in the world relative to our GDP. Do we want to do that? Then you go down to the counties, it is the same top up, and they now cap it up as 10 years. I mean, it is so sad that a country that is so bedeviled with problems is now adding more. And then I hear somebody telling me, oh, the prime minister will not earn a higher salary. What is a salary in the life of any public office? It is the other hidden costs. Tea of 11 million in your office, per diems, the vehicles. Salary is 0.00001% of what it takes to take care of an office. And then We are told many things are going to happen with BBI, that Higher Education Loans Board was one of them. Really? Shouldn't the Board of Higher Education Loans Board sit there? Then we are told that the youth are going to have tax holiday. Oh, if you don't have work, what is a holiday in the first place? If you don't have work, what is the value of a holiday? Then you create a youth commission. Don't we have many of those youth things?
You actually have a ministry.
Yeah, we have a ministry for youth. So what is the commission going to do that the ministry cannot do? So when you look at the BBI, and it's so painful that the political leadership thinks, this is what pains me as a Kenyan, the assumption that Kenyans are so stupid, so desperate, that they can be told what to do and they will not question it. And we are now being told there is no time. Time for what? Who is Kenya being wound up? Kenya is the next, and we'll die and leave Kenya here. There is time. We need not and we must not have a referendum before the next election. In fact, I dare say, because of the poisoned environment, let us postpone this BBI business until after the elections in 2022, when there is sobriety. When there is sobriety, then we can begin to discuss. And remember, this is something I must say. Parliament, Kenyan Parliament, in its wisdom, in the month of February the year 2014, did mandate the Auditor General of the Republic of Kenya to undertake a social audit of the Kenyan Constitution. Ouko did so, and I was one of the persons who did quality check. He did so and released a report in 2016 in which he said, amongst other things, that we have too many members of parliament. We should reduce them. We have too many commissions. We should reduce them. He fell short of saying that we had too many counties. 47 counties? The United States of America, with a population of 330 million, with a GDP of 20 trillion, has only 50 states. And yet, as I speak to you now, it is more expensive to take care of a Kenyan governor than it is to take care of a governor in the state of California, which is only one state and whose economy is 15 times larger than Kenya. Who said we needed deputy ministers? What do? I only know 3 members of parliament in Nairobi. What are the members? I don't know the others. I don't know my MCA. I don't know what they do. Now we are saying that we have had the NMS. Nairobi is going to be added 12 constituents. To do what? If there were MPs working, MCAs working, why would we have General Badi being appointed by President Kenyatta? What are they doing? Tell me another thing. If you have a constituency development fund, why do you need a ward fund? Is the ward not in the constituency? And indeed, if you have the county government with a governor, why do you need those funds? Why don't those funds just go to the county, and then we have a vote for the constituency and a vote for the ward? I mean, sometimes it is so painful to read a document which, this is how not to amend a constitution. This is now how not to write a constitution. Unfortunately, I think the people who are proposing this amendment have the wherewithal to put it down our throat. They have the capacity.
I've actually said you'll take it like malaria drugs.
Oh yeah, they have the capacity, but let them remember this. Let them remember this. There have been leaders in the world who thought that they were larger than life, almost as large as death. But they too have their comings and their goings. So when we are amending a constitution, let us think of the next generation and not the next elections. But even if they force it down our throats, we will have our say, so that history may record that when our constitution was being mutilated for no reason, we raised our voices even if they could not be heard at their most eloquent. That will be our contribution to history.
Wow. That's very profound.
Churches have spoken. The Muslim ulamas have spoken. The imams have spoken. The academics have spoken. Everybody has spoken. saying, let us reason together. The political class, at least some of them are saying, we shall not reason with you. Yet even God in his majestic divinity called the people, God called the people and say, let us come and reason together. Our politicians are saying, no, there is no time. What is the time? Who is this who is prescribing time?
Where are we going?
I will wake up very early in the morning to vote no. Very early in the morning to vote no, even if I'm on the losing side. Unless people retreat and say, let us reason together.
Wow. That's very profound. You've gone back to history. Even before I spin back the history of BBI and all these conversations. How do we protect our constitution? You've talked about mutilation of the constitution. How do you protect it to an extent that you don't wake up tomorrow, PLO, we come, we shake hands and we say, now, let's solemnize our marriage, the political marriage, the change of our constitution. How do we protect our constitution from pursuit of personal gratuities?
You know, I've been reading, I've read a few friends of mine who are as frustrated as I am. I've read Yashpal Guy commenting on this. I've read my good friend Ahmed Nasser speaking about it, David Ndii, I've heard Martha Karua. I've read the thesis which is written by my good friend Professor Githum Wigai, who talks about the amendments of the Constitution. And Githu, in an article written in 1993 when we were at the CKRC, said that the Kenyan constitution has been dismembered so badly that we do not know how to deal with it. During the same year, Professor Ali Mazrui, the late, said, if African politics is ethnically prone, can we have ethnic proof constitutions? We introduced Articles 255, 256, and 257 in the Constitution to create an environment where it is not easy to amend the Constitution. But see how we had an attempt to amend the Constitution through Okoa, Kenya, which failed. We had an attempt to amend the Constitution through Punguza Mizigo, which was not allowed to proceed. We now have an attempt at amending the Constitution.
Through BBI.
Even through BBI. It would appear that the appetite of the political class, the current political class, to interfere with the Constitution is so deeply seated that even when you want to create a rigid environment, they don't care. You know, Bitok, when you hear that we are going to spend 14 billion to undertake a referendum, and I'm told, I do not know whether it's correct, they have never released the amount of money that they spent in this BBI.
So far.
They haven't, but it must be in the billions. And at the same time, doctors are dying because there is no PPEs.
Wow.
At the same time, our children are dying because there are no masks. At the same time, people who supply desks have not been paid. At the same time, my good friend Fred Matiang'i, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, says that 40,000 police officers don't have police uniform because we have no resources. At the same time, we are borrowing money from the IMF. At the same time, we are having the Kenya Power increasing tariffs. At the same time, we are paying for SGR through taxes. At the same time, those who did work for counties cannot be paid. At the same time, counties have not received money for the last 3 months. Then you tell me that the priority is BBI, then I cannot understand you. Then I lose you. Then I do not know who you are. Then I do not know what you want. Then I do not know whether you love Kenya. Then I do not know what you intend to do with Kenya. And that is my frustration with the people that I call the BBI Knights. What? The country is on fire and you are not bringing the fire engine. You are asking us to build a new house. We forget about the old. Educate me, persuade me, not through insults. Persuade me by force of reason. And we are ready to be persuaded that that is the priority. It is true that our constitution can be improved, but what can never be improved? Let us implement this one first. Unfortunately, when God wants to destroy a country, sometimes it makes her leaders impervious to reason. I hope that this is not the case with our country. People out there must now ask. We are told that BBI is going to transform our lives. I want to talk to the people in Nyanza. How will BBI revive Sony Sugar, Muhoroni, Miwani, Mumias? How will BBI revive the cotton industry? How will BBI revive the cooperative industries, the fishing cooperatives? The people in Mombasa, how will BBI help Ramisi? How will they help Salt? How will they help Cashew Nut? Those who are in Central Province, is your milk going to be better produced? You are going to have better milk because of BBI? Is the coffee yield and the tea yield going to be improved? In Kericho with Finlay closing, will BBI change all this? The young men and women who have lost in Ministry of Tourism, on the day that we endorse BBI, if it will happen in the month of June, will we now create 3 million jobs courtesy of BBI? Or will merely have created the offices of the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Ministers and the opposition, and will have renamed the Cabinet Secretaries, Ministers, and will now give MPs a career progression of being cabinet ministers and have deputy prime ministers? I want to know how this BBI is going to revive the institution that have died, how Intercontinental Hotel is going to be open courtesy of BBI, how Mayfair Hotel in Nairobi is going to open courtesy of BBI, how garbage collection will improve simply because we have 12 more MPs in Nairobi. I want to be told. When I'm told these things, I'll be in the forefront of campaigning for BBI. Tell us, don't intimidate us, don't threaten us, don't troll us, don't insult us, don't cajole us. Just tell us. Just reason with us. Like God said, let us come and reason with the people. Accept that you do not have the monopoly of wisdom. You are mortals just as us. You may mean well, but when you have too many people asking too many fundamental questions, turn back and said, Waswahili husema baniani mbaya kiatu chake dawa. Sisi ndio baniani hao wabaya, kiatu chetu huenda ni dawa.
Wow. I'll give you water break as I throw it to Lucia to make a few commentaries. Wow. Anyway, Lucia.
It's very hard to speak after that, Gerald. Very difficult.
In fact, this is the time we should be crying because those are very tough questions.
I'm so
Those are very
touched.
tough questions.
I can relate to his frustration. He actually speaks my language, just in better English. But everything he says, I can relate to. You know, I actually have a few questions because it has been said, and I think I'm one of the people who has said this more times than I'd like to admit it. There is nothing in this country that is going to move unless we have the political goodwill. And I've been fought on this because I'm told, oh, we need legislation and policy. But we do have legislation and policy. I think our country has some of the best legislation and policy in the entire world. But it only remains to be good on paper, and the implementation is zilch. How then do we make sure that implementation is done? Because as a young person, I'd give you an example, and I'm really glad you spoke about this. The BBI report talks about a 7-year tax holiday, but that is based on the assumption that you finished school, you couldn't get a job, you approached the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, and you got that funding to set up a business that is now working in order for you to benefit from that 7-year holiday tax. But then when you look at it, the Youth Enterprise Development Fund is not working. All the affirmative action that government has put in place are not working. And if they do work, then it's a child of someone who's known somewhere. It doesn't help the people who it's meant to help. There is zero monitoring and evaluation. So we do not restructure our programs to suit the challenges that we meet along the way. It's just like, oh, I look at you and I figure, maybe you need a pair of shoes. So I give you a pair of shoes. I don't know what your shoe size is. I don't know if you like the type of shoe I've given you. I just look at you and go like, I'm giving you a cowboy boot that's number 17, you know? And then I never come back to ask you, did the boot fit? Is it comfortable when you walk? Does it pinch, you know? Never, nothing like that. And I feel like it goes back to the lack of political goodwill, because we don't have servant leadership in this country. Now, what action is it that we as the people need to take? Because one, we do have a constitution, but we don't have constitutionalism. How do we entrench that in ourselves so that we are better placed to demand for our basic rights, which we are denied? Just basic rights, healthcare, education. Look at our children. They've been out of school for a very long time, and nobody right now is talking about improving the education infrastructure. The BBI does not mention that, does not mention our technological infrastructure. Instead, we young people are expected to be content with menial jobs in the name of kazi mtaani and wheelbarrownomics. Why do we always have to settle for less?
You know, you've spoken about very grave things, and I'll give 3 important individuals who have said important things, then I answer your question. Yash Guy, when we were making the constitution, said, and I agree with him, that Africa is a graveyard of beautifully written constitutions which are honored in breach. Powerful. My good teacher and friend Hastings Wilfred Opinyo Kothogendo wrote in 1972, the problem of Africa is constitutions without constitutionalism, hollow documents. And lastly, the great president of Chile, Salvador Allende, said of his own country, which is also true of ours, that in Chile we have all the laws dealing with all the things except one law, the law that says we should implement all the other laws. Cynical, but speaks. If you look at the pieces of legislation we have in this country, you'll be amazed. I said before you joined that I grew here, partly here in Nairobi, grew up partly here in Nairobi, partly in my rural home. I was in my rural home up to standard 5 in Usenge Primary School. I did not carry anything. I paid 20 shillings as fees. I never carried an exercise book because it was given at school. I never carried any textbook because it was given at school. When I came back to Nairobi in standard 6, I was here in Maringo, Jericho, and I went to school at St. Patrick's Primary School at 1 every day. We had lunch called buruga, made at the city council kitchen here in next to Pumwani Hostel. The systems worked. Things were fumigated. I was in Jericho on Sunday. Last Sunday, just driving, which I do often. The sewage is gone. In Buruburu, in Jericho, in Maringo, everywhere, the sewage system is gone. Are there bylaws? There are bylaws, for example, that say that hand-drawn carts shall not be used in the city center of Nairobi. We have mikokoteni. So the problem is that there was a time in this country where we had men and women who loved this country. They earned very little. They had no constituency development fund. They had no ward development fund. They just had the will to do what they needed to do. That crop of politicians long disappeared. And the electorate has also been a problem in this regard. I dare want to say, and I'll irritate and annoy some, there is a crop of politicians in Kenya. As long as they are active in Kenyan politics, Kenya will never realize our potential. In Kiswahili, there is a word called uchuro. Uchuro in Kiswahili means bad omen. Kuna watu ambao wana uchuro katika siasa za Kenya. Kama hawajang'atuliwa, Kenya haitafikia vipeo vya ubora. Because wana ubinafsi. They are selfish. It is Nelson Holisasa Mandela who once said, when you treat politicians like gods, that is the day you release the devil. Oh, yeah. And I think in Kenya we have done that. And we have done it so badly that I go to church and I see somebody who never worships in my church, and he comes in when the service has started, and the clergyman stops even when they are administering the Holy Communion. To that, I must credit the Muslims. They will never do that. It's only my Christian church that does that. So I'm saying that we have laws. And that is why it is important to energize young people. The people must make a demand. Right now, the only reason why Nairobi appears to work is because of residents' associations. I'm sure you, wherever you live, you have residents' associations.
Course, yes.
You are taking care of your security. You are taking
Our
care
own
of
roads.
your own roads. You have your own water. You are doing your own roads, garbage collection, everything. The day we make demands, like they do in Europe and America, that is the day these individuals are going to wake up. In fact, if you were to ask me, Nairobi does not need members of parliament at all. Nairobi does not need MCAs at all. Just allow the residents' associations to run Nairobi, and you appoint and they hire a technical arm. Nairobi will change in 5 years. And we will be there. We'll not earn any salary. We'll just do the job. Nairobi will be the city in the sun that it was. So it is, when I listen to you and I feel your frustration, I hope that younger Kenyans are feeling this.
Oh, yeah.
I hope that I've seen the headline, the photograph in the Star newspaper today, the 30th day of November, a young man somewhere in my rural area in Nyanza, taking an old woman through the process of signing for the BBI. I'm certain that that lady has not read the report. The report has not been read to her. She's been made possibly to believe that this is the only way in which our son will become the president, and therefore he's signing for their son to be the president. I saw another one in Western Province, and I'm sure they have been told this is the only way in which one of our sons will become the prime minister, and I'm sure they think they are making their son the prime minister. And I'm sure in Ukambani they are being told this is the only way in which your son will become the vice president.
Once again.
And they are signing once again and deputy president. So they are being misled. And yet the good book says, my people die and suffer because of ignorance.
Lack of knowledge.
Lack of knowledge.